Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Iran is not backing down in the face of more U.S. military strikes. The Revolutionary Guard launched drone and missile attacks against U.S. allies in the region this morning.
In Tel Aviv, a Democratic Party leader gave a speech critical of Netanyahu administration. Emanuel says Israel's relationship with the U.S. is at a crossroads, and America should reconsider its support for the Jewish state. Chris Mitchell reports.
The U.S. carried out a second round of strikes against 90 Iranian targets yesterday. Iran responded with missile and drone attacks against U.S. allies Bahrain and Kuwait and threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Before leaving the NATO summit in Turkey yesterday, President Trump blasted Iran.
They want to make a deal, but they don't know how to make a deal, and then they go around shooting ships at night. I don't like that.
The president also signaled major policy shifts in the region, implying he'd sell state-of-the-art F-35s to Turkey, a move opposed by Israel. He also said he will remove Syria from the state sponsor of terrorism list.
I think I will, yeah. I think I will. Why wouldn't I? He's done a great job.
That drew criticism because Syria's new president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, formerly led an al-Qaeda affiliate, and his government has allowed atrocities against minorities, including Christians. While military tensions continue, another battle is unfolding over the future of the U.S.-Israel alliance. On Wednesday, prominent Democrat Rahm Emanuel, former chief of staff to President Obama, and a potential presidential candidate in 2028, gave a landmark speech in Tel Aviv. He questioned if America should fundamentally redefine its relationships with Israel, a relationship he says is at a crossroads.
It cannot stand or survive as it has been. To maintain the strength of our ties, this alliance needs significant changes and a new direction.
Emanuel cited a dramatic drop in support for Israel.
In 2022, 55% of Americans held a favorable view of Israel. Today, it is 37%, and it is dropping.
Emanuel said the new direction means the U.S. needs to stop unconditional support and blame Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Unconditional support has produced a prime minister who has presumed that his strategic interests would incur no political costs if he ignored America's concerns about settlements and sparked a regional war. Unconditional support has allowed you to deny food and medical relief to innocent Palestinians in Gaza.
Netanyahu's supporters counter that Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran ignited the regional war. They also argue Israel has facilitated hundreds of tons of humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Well, Chris Mitchell is here live with us in the studio for more, and I just can't imagine. What's the reaction to this in Israel?
Well, the reaction on, say, on the left side is that they're criticizing Netanyahu, which for them is a good thing, and they have elections coming up in the fall, and so that...
Well, Rahm Emanuel was part of the Obama administration. He was chief of staff.
Exactly.
Obama's famous for taking State Department money and using it to campaign against Netanyahu, and I assume Rahm was part of that effort.
You would think so, yeah. And there's a contentious relationship between Emanuel and Netanyahu. Emanuel apparently in the White House really castigated Netanyahu for settlements in Judea and Samaria. So there's a long history there between the two. Netanyahu's actually called Emanuel a self-hating Jew, and so there's a harsh relationship between the two.
Just to reinforce what he said, denying food and medical aid to Gazans, from my understanding, is not the facts on the ground.
Not at all.
That Israel is providing food, taking from its own food supply to do so, and is providing medical aid.
Continues to do that. Hundreds of tons, maybe thousands of tons of supplies, medical supplies, food and water has gone into Gaza since the beginning, right after October 7th, even during the military campaign. They're actually aiding and abetting their enemy because Hamas really confiscates much of this aid. aid. So when he said that, I had the same reaction. That's simply not true. They have facilitated, more aid into Gaza than many other places in the world.
Does this show a pretty broad shift in the political landscape? Here he is, he's Jewish, and is it showing that within the leadership in North America, there is now a really profound shift against Israel in saying, I can no longer support Israel?
Yeah, definitely. This represents a huge shift, and I think he's representative of some, maybe the establishment of the Democratic Party. And other people as well, they see this not as just part of the information war against Israel right now. Some people call this the eighth front. 7 military fronts. You go from Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and including Iran, the 7 military fronts. The eighth front is the information war, and they believe that Israel is not only questioning Israel, but they're questioning its very legitimacy. And the legitimacy of Israel is under attack right now. But many people say it's not the first target. It's not the last target. It may be the first target. But some people are saying this is really questioning the legitimacy of Western civilization, part of the Red-Green Alliance, radical Islam, and the progressive left coming against Israel and Judeo-Christian values. Now, what has come as a response to that is sort of an unprecedented alliance of Jews and Christians. We saw that earlier this year in Nashville, the Judeo-Christian Zionist Congress, based on the same model as the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland in 1897. But this alliance, recognizing that this is not against just the Jews and Israel, it's against Christian values, Judeo-Christian values, and they see this as an important battle to be facing right now. And this, it's really an unprecedented alliance of Christians and Jews. I've never seen anything quite like it, but they recognize the threat.
Emanuel had to vet that speech. He's not going to go on his own and say, these are my personal... He's making a policy statement for the Democrat Party. So did he get approval for that? Did Obama weigh in? Did the likely presidential candidates of 2028 have some kind of... I assume he's one of them. So it's a major policy shift and a major policy platform.
Yeah. Reportedly, he ran this by Bill and Hillary Clinton, and reportedly also President Obama. Something so major as a landmark policy speech, presumably, preceding a presidential campaign, certainly had to be vetted by some of the major players in the Democratic Party.
I also have to take issue with another thing he said in the speech, that your scientists risk being boycotted, your investment banks risk being boycotted, your industry risk being, no one supporting it financially. It was astounding to me that he would say that from a platform in Tel Aviv. And I'm going, isn't there not a double standard here? Are you not saying the same thing against Iran? Are you not saying the same thing? Look at the number of attacks against their own civilians. Why the double standard? Why are you saying, well, Israel, you're at risk if you continue this? It just seems to be absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, exactly. And he also said, in the speech, he called for a sovereign Palestinian state. He also called for like a 23-state solution, 21 Arab states, Israel, and a sovereign Palestinian state. I felt that was a bit tone deaf, because I don't think they're left or right. There's really an appetite for a sovereign Palestinian state, especially after October 7th.
Well, I don't think there's an appetite within the Palestinian people, and hasn't been since 1948. They could have had a state numerous times. And the Arabs have never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And so he's very educated. He's very informed.
Why
this I guess, tone deaf.
Yeah, and he's calling for sanctions against those that Israelis that have attacked Palestinians. He doesn't say the same thing about Palestinians that have attacked Israelis. Also talking about maybe not having the memorandum of understanding that has been, supplying maybe $3 to $4 billion each year. Now he wants Israel to be like any other country. So he's really reducing the kind of efforts and the kind of support that the U.S. has been giving to Israel for decades.
Well, once again, Israel being isolated, and it's not the first time in history that that's happened, and we know the ultimate.
And they have survived.
Yeah, they've made it through. Well, Chris, thanks for the insight. Let's turn now to politics and go to CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody. So why this speech? Why now? Is this a prelude to the presidential run?
Yes, for sure. Rahm Emanuel is definitely going to run in 2028, and that's what you saw there. But to your point, Gordon, and to Chris Mitchell's points, and by the way, a great conversation, this goes to a much wider issue here, and that is, where is the Democrat Party going to stand when it comes to Israel specifically? And I think this was Rahm Emanuel's attempt to split the difference. And you might say, well, wait a minute, he was pretty critical of Israel. He was. That's the one side of it. On the other side of it, he didn't talk about that Israel's committing genocide. He didn't use that word. He talked about the Palestinians need to recognize Israel's right to their historic homeland. He talked about that, though it was just a brief line. It wasn't very detailed, so it raises a lot of questions of what he actually means by that. And he talked about that the Palestinians need to stop funding the killing of Jews and naming streets after terrorists. So, I mean, there was this other side of it that Rahm Emanuel did talk about. And that, I think, is where the party establishment of this comes in, this dynamic comes in, which is the Democrat Party knows that if they're going to go far left, which their base wants, that's going to be problematic. But at the same time, they have to appease the base. So this is kind of a landing pad, if you will, at least for now. We'll see. I think it's going to morph as we move forward.
Well, there's a new narrative in American politics, and it's a surprising narrative to me that if you're Jewish and you're a Zionist, you support Israel, that somehow or other you're no longer American, that your allegiance is to Israel, your allegiance is not to America. Is this him just personally trying to position himself with that left wing to say, well, read my speech, I'm not a Zionist?
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely more than just code talk, but this was a wink to the left to say, hey, look, I'm moving your way. I mean, let's remember, Rahm Emanuel, although he's been very critical of Netanyahu throughout the years, throughout the decades, quite frankly, overall, he's actually been pretty pro-Israel. We're talking about decades ago, if you will. I mean, relative to what the Democrat Party looks like today. As you mentioned, he's Jewish, but it's way beyond that. I mean, his father fought in the 1948 War of Independence when, of course, all of those countries and armies fought against Israel back in 1948. He was part of an underground Zionist movement. I'm talking about his father back in the day. And the roots run very, very deep. And his father, up until he passed, he was as pro-Israel as you can get, though he started to take a bit of a pacifist turn later in his years. And so that also affected Rahm Emanuel. So this is significant because it's coming from Rahm Emanuel rather than some just kind of a run-of-the-mill Democrat.
Does it show a larger split within the Jewish community right here in America? They've, for so long, have been Democrat and solidly voting Democrat. And at the same time, you could rely on them to be solidly pro-Israel. Is this split, we want to stay Democrat, and so now we're going to start criticizing Israel?
Yeah, and I think it's even more than a split. I mean, as you see, Gordon, the polls are not just suggesting, but they're emphatically showing that support among Democrats is waning for Israel, and specifically even among Jews in America. And a lot of people scratch their head at that. And look, hello, here I am. I grew up Jewish. I was bar mitzvahed and everything, so I have a bit of an idea of what's going on here. I grew up as a New York liberal Jew. I wasn't liberal myself, but my family was liberal. And so I understand what's going on here because, remember, American Jews, as you know, Gordon, I mean, American Jews, for the most part, are Reform Jews. And because they're Reform Jews, they are liberal Jews. So the religion, and I'm not trying to insult anybody here, but the truth of the matter is when it comes to Reform Judaism, the religion isn't Judaism as much as it is liberalism, as much as it is secularism. And so when a lot of people see, well, wait a minute, how could an American Jew be against Israel? Oh, it makes plenty of sense. And that's why you see more Jewish support for Mamdani than you do for Netanyahu or writ large Israel.
Is there also a political narrative here that it's anti-Netanyahu or anti-Orthodox and what the Orthodox do in Israeli society? Is that the narrative as well?
I think that's part of it. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you know, Zionism has become the new anti-Semitism, and that's been going on for quite some time now. And now it's just morphed and taken hold. And quite frankly, Gordon, we know it's not just the far left. We know it's the woke right. As a matter of fact, Mark Levin at the CUFI Summit, Christians United for Israel Summit, just in the last couple of days, called them the woke Reich, as in R-E-I-C-H. And so you've got the far left, you've got the far right, and then you throw in Congress into all of this, which is not just far left Democrats, but even some Republicans are now saying it's time to rethink aid to Israel. Well, you've got somewhat of a perfect storm, an anti-Israel perfect storm brewing, and the iceberg is right ahead, Gordon.
All right, well, let's turn to Maine. And where I didn't think politics in America could get any crazier, but I was wrong. We've got a candidate who's dropped out after a whole bunch of accusations. So what now? Who are the Democrats? They've called for a convention. I don't know how they put that together in such a short period of time, but I guess they can do it. Who do you see emerging from it?
Well, I like to give you my analysis by just doing this, Gordon. There, that's the analysis. At this point, Maine doesn't have many answers. What they're telling us, the state officials there, is that there's going to be this convention, whatever that looks like exactly, by July 27th to pick a new nominee. And so now we'll find out whether or not what nominees will be in the hopper, if you will. There is Vali Geiger, who is someone that Graham Plattner really wanted. It kind of is more copacetic with his vision. There's Troy Jackson there in Maine that is also, if you will, kind of out of the Graham Plattner mold. So I think those are two names you'll look at. But in terms of who picks the nominee, it's probably going to end up being 600 delegates from the state of Maine. 500 of those delegates haven't even been chosen yet. No one's quite sure exactly who's going to be on the ballot at the convention, and there's now talk about whether or not these candidates who announce to replace Plattner will have to get a certain amount of signatures to actually be nominated at the convention. So who the heck knows, Gordon? And, you know, I'll be standing by with, you know, Alka-Seltzer as I watch all of this unfold.
Well, you're going to be very busy, which is really good. And it's going to be a very interesting election cycle. And it's definitely increasing my prayer life. David, thanks for the insight, and thank you so much for joining with us.
You bet.